Hello, everyone. We're so happy that you all joined us today. As per usual, it's so amazing to look out on that chat box and see people from tuning in from all over the world. So if you haven't let us know already, please write in that chat box. Let us know where you're tuning in from. That's kind of one of the things I like to geek out on this because I think we've covered every state and certainly a number of countries at this point. So it's just fun to see where you're all tuning in from. Thank you. I'm very excited in a moment to start this conversation with our panelists here. We have an amazing panel set up for today. But before I do that, just a couple show notes before we begin. If you haven't already, please click subscribe. The subscribe button right in your YouTube channel there. What's really great about this is that we do a ton of other content as well, and when you subscribe, and also click the notification bell next to subscribe. You'll get notified every time we go live. You'll get to join us not just for these experiences, but we also do a live stream every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time called Feeling Through Live. Brian, who's one of our guests today, has been on there. So has Robert. Commissioner, we'll have to have you on there as well soon. First, we'll get through this conversation. There's the thumbs up. Love it. So you'll be able to watch all of that. And for those of you who don't know what Feeling Through Live is, it's this weekly live stream where I speak with people from the deafblind community and beyond about issues that are relevant to everyone. We've had some great conversations on there already. Got a ton of great ones coming up. And also a great way to keep in the loop about everything we do is through our social media. So, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever your preference is. We're at Feeling Through on all the things, and that's a great way to find out about us. One of the things that we can't do this, we can't have this conversation today without acknowledging that yesterday was the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and certainly that'll guide some of our conversation today. I'm gonna be going right into that topic in a moment, but I want to remind you all, feel free throughout this Q&A and this panel and Q&A to type whatever questions that you might have in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that throughout and certainly try to get to all of your questions. So without further ado, I want to actually start with Brian and Commissioner Darkangelo, because Robert, everyone just got a good chance to get very acquainted with you over the last 45 minutes or so. But for those of you who might be meeting Brian and Commissioner Darkangelo for the first time, I'd like for you to know a little bit more about these two really amazing people. So Brian, why don't we start with you? Some of you might have saw Brian on our last episode of Feeling Through Live, which was really great. And if you didn't see that, you can go back and watch that in any of our other episodes on our YouTube channel. But Brian, can you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Brian Switzer. As Doug mentioned, I'm an assistive technology instructor in the Career Launch program at Perkins School for the Blind, one of the oldest school for the blind, the oldest school for the blind in the U.S. And I am also considered deafblind. I have no usable vision, although I can see a little bit of light. And my hearing loss is in the severe range. I was diagnosed as a kid with Usher syndrome, which is one of the more common causes of deaf blindness. It affects both your hearing and your vision. And so I'm really honored to be here to talk about some of my life experiences and obviously the ADA turning 30. And what an incredible moment.
Thank you, Brian. And Commissioner Darkangelo, can you introduce yourself and let us all know a little bit about you?
Sure, Doug. Thank you so much. And thanks, Brian. Thanks, Robert. Everybody who is involved here. Doug, I think you've tapped into a story here that we've all known about for years, people at the Helen Keller Center, that everybody has talent. Everybody has something to give. So thank you for doing that and lending your talents to this wonderful project. So good afternoon, everybody. It's David Darkangelo. I'm Commissioner of the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. And I'm the latest commissioner, starting with, though, our three original commissioners, one of which was Helen Keller herself. So I take that very seriously, and we have a terrific history here at MCB that we try to live up to every day. And really, it's about supporting independence and self-determination, access to opportunities for all of our consumers, and particularly our deaf-blind consumers, where we have a whole unit dedicated to providing deaf-blind extended supports is what we call it. And we work closely with the Helen Keller Center and have about 1,200 consumers that are deaf-blind all throughout Massachusetts. So working with them every day to try to meet their goals of independence and self-determination. And films like this are a great way of getting the message out that everybody's got something to offer and all of our people have talent. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great, thanks, Commissioner. And I love the Helen Keller connections across the board here. The one that you just mentioned, which I was unaware of until you mentioned that. Of course, Brian, last week we were talking about Perkins School for the Blind, where you work, and her connection there is having attended theirs as well. And then, of course, Helen Keller Services, who are our ongoing partner in this endeavor. So it's fun to see those connections across the board there. I love that. So yeah, again, I'm going to want to jump into the ADA in just a moment. But first, Robert, you've now been a part of a number of the live experiences that we were able to do before COVID, and now a few of the virtual ones. And I'm just wondering how you feel like the being at the live screenings compares to doing it in this virtual space.
Well, I absolutely loved meeting deafblind people and people from all over. So doing that traveling and being in the field has been terrific. Now with COVID, I would say that I have gotten used to using Zoom as a platform, but I would say one of the things I truly miss is meeting different people. I love both being able to do Zoom and being able to do the virtual. I love the premieres and traveling, but I do absolutely miss the face-to-face meeting other people.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. And I imagine you speak for all of us on this panel when you talk about how much we've been using Zoom lately. But certainly, one of the things I will add to that, and I definitely second that, but I think there's something that's been really amazing about the ways in which we can connect with some people we maybe wouldn't be able to connect with had we not been doing it virtually. And I saw someone pop up who's watching in Russia. I believe someone is joining us from Romania, and a number of other countries throughout the world. If you're watching from overseas somewhere and haven't let us know where yet, please do, because that's always fun to see. But now, again, moving into the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Commissioner, I'd love for you to just start with, for those who are watching who maybe aren't familiar with it, can you just give a little bit of an overview of what it is to begin with?
Sure. So prior to the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, prior to 1990, people with disabilities were really relying upon things like the Rehabilitation Act and some of the other laws that had been in existence. And while that was good for people regarding VR, vocational rehabilitation and work and things like that, it left out very other important aspects of life for people with disabilities. So the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, has 5 titles, starting with employment, the role of state and local governments, public accommodations, Title III, and then Title IV for our deaf-blind users and deaf users, really important, with a lot of the communication access things in that. Now, everybody wants to point to 1990, and believe me, passing it was very significant. It was a complete bipartisan effort. I've actually got a letter from President Bush, how he indicates it's one of his proudest pieces of legislation that he's ever signed. So it was really important, but it did evolve as well, particularly with the ADA Amendments Act that came several years later. So it's been refined over time. We continue to refine it now in many different court decisions and case law that's delivered. But make no mistake about it, the ADA is the preeminent federal civil rights law for people with disabilities and really ensures non-discrimination in workplaces, in places of public accommodation. And so it's just very important for not only people with disabilities, but America, our entire society, because I believe that everybody has something to give to America. Everybody has talent. Everybody has something to offer as this American experiment continues. So Very important law, and we continue to try to improve.
Thank you. And I definitely want to talk about those improvements in a moment. But first, I'd like to take it to Robert, just to touch on what the commissioner was just talking about, everyone really having something valuable to offer. It's we found out during the making of this film that you are the first deafblind actor to star in a film. What do you think that means? Please, Commissioner, please use that thumbs up as much as you like. I love seeing that pop up there. For those of you who are listening to this or with a braille display, the Commissioner Dark Angelo has a thumbs up emoji on a piece of paper that he'll occasionally hold up in front of him that he's doing now to signify his approval of what's happening, and we encourage him to keep using that. But
Thank you for the audio description, Doug.
But again, back to Robert there. Robert, what do you think it means to other people in the deafblind community to see that you are the first deafblind actor to star in a film?
It's a great question, and I guess I'll try my best to answer it. I think that hearing sighted people really don't get an opportunity to understand the lives of deafblind people. And as the first deafblind actor, as a lead, I think that it's probably surprising to many hearing sighted people that a deafblind actor could do that. I think it may bring those communities together because, of course, deafblind people know that already. We know that we can do it. We know that we have the capability and the talent, but it's about convincing the wider community to trust us that we can do it. I have always thought positively, and I continue to do so. And I think, yeah, why not? We can do it.
Absolutely. And, certainly, something that just from being in the media space myself, something that has been really interesting to see over the last couple weeks around the 30th anniversary of the ADA I was actually pleasantly surprised to see the coverage in media. In the New York Times, they were doing a ton of articles around there. I think Obama just did a post about it, and certainly there was some encouragement around that, being that there's part of what we're trying to do with this experience is have there be a lot more media representation, not just in the deafblind community, but in a lot of related disability communities. But I guess if we're talking about some modicum of improvements made here, certainly I personally it was nice to see a lot of people forwarded me a ton of articles over the last few weeks that they came across, knowing obviously the space I'm in, and it was nice to see it in other people's awareness too. Brian, we talked about this a little bit in our conversation on Friday, but I'd love for you to share with people, what does the ADA mean to you personally, and how has it affected your personal life throughout your life?
Yeah, definitely. The ADA really has empowered me to be able to attend school. It required that school to accommodate and make sure I have everything that I need in the classroom. So, for instance, when I was a kid, I could not read a blackboard. So the teacher one time put up some math problems on the blackboard, and I just couldn't read it. So the ADA really allowed me to, advocate and say that I need a whiteboard in the classroom, something that I can read. And then later on, I became a high school math teacher. So, going through those runs from the time I was in school, making sure I had my accommodations in place, to graduate school, to where I work now, I have accommodation in place to make sure that I can do my job on a daily basis. And, as I travel around in public with a guide dog, the ADA really protects my right to be anywhere in public with my guide dog. And even as I run marathon, the ADA allowed me to go up to race directors and say, hey, make me a part of this race. In order to do this race, I need to be with two-sighted guides who will help guide me along the race track. And so the ADA really allowed me to live a fulfilling life one that I wouldn't be able to do without it. And really now, as you know, I'm home, I'm married, I have a guide dog that lived with me. You know, I wouldn't have had the life where I own a home and live off on my own without the ADA supporting me every step of the way.
I love that. And, I think something that was so impactful from our conversation was, again, I encourage you all to go back and watch the conversation from last Friday because, Brian shared a lot of other stuff around that. But one thing that is very evident about you, Brian, is that you are someone who from age of 4 where you lied about being able to swim just so you could jump in the water and figure it out. You're someone who's, and obviously being a highly intelligent person who's been, a teacher and certainly knows a lot of advanced mathematics that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. You're someone who obviously always had all of the skill, the whole skill set to live a very successful life, but to have a legislation that makes that clear and evident to other people to help create a world around you that embraces that, I think is what really is important to note, and also something that's very much, I think, and I hope something that people take away from the Feeling Through experience. And what Robert echoed earlier is that, of course, we can do this, but it's important for other people outside of the community to understand that, who maybe otherwise wouldn't know these really basic things that are really important to understand.
Yeah, and I think the way to get there, Doug, is through concepts like universal design that promotes access. Who here hasn't used an automatic door opener? Well, that's designed for people with mobility challenges. Yet many people use it. Why? Because it's easier to do. It's a better way of doing things, right? So I think if the more understanding we can have that people of all abilities still have ability, and let's focus on what people can do as opposed to what they can't do. I think those are some of the themes of the ADA that come through, the non-discrimination aspect of the ADA. Really, let's bring everybody into the dialogue, depending upon what data set you use. Somewhere between 12 and 20% of the general population are people with disabilities. So there are brothers and sisters, our neighbors, our sons and daughters, and everybody in society, and we're all in this together. I really believe that we have much to learn from each other, and sometimes when challenges are placed, those are some of the best learning moments. And I really think you captured it in feeling through.
Thank you, Commissioner. And what you were saying there reminds me of something that I heard from Wale Sabri, who works for the New York City Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. He ended our conversation a couple weeks ago by saying accessibility is for everyone. And I thought it was so interesting to talk about, and you really just hit the nail on the head with that. And there's a lot of layers to that. But on the one hand, the accessibility, a lot of people who are who aren't in the disability community per se still use a lot of technology that is accessible technology. And beyond that,
helps a lot of people, and particularly some people with disabilities also.
Exactly. And also to your point too, as well, is that it relates to this larger point that we're all better off when everyone is doing well, right? And that
Absolutely.
That affects every moment of every day. So there's really operating on two levels there in this really, really profound and interesting way. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And just to kind of continue on there, you'd mentioned, certainly we've come a long way over the last 30 years, but certainly there's still a ways to go. And I'm wondering, in reading up on you a little bit, I saw that you helped establish the ADA Improvement Grant Program. Obviously, this is a space that you dwell in. Can you share your personal thoughts and feelings about where we have to go now?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, it's 2020 and we're celebrating the first deafblind actor. Certainly there's been people with the talent previously, but for whatever reason they weren't tapped into. It took a visionary like Doug here to come along. So thank you for doing that. And thank you, Robert and Artemio, for waiting for the bus, I guess, right? One night. So there's still a ways to go. And it's in so many different ways. I really think the biggest thing, though, is the level of understanding that it's not those poor people with disabilities, right? And pity, like pity, I would rather be hated than pitied. Pity to me is like the worst thing. So I think we need to still get beyond that. And I think we're making strides as a society there. But like in Hollywood, Hollywood, to their credit now, I think has recognized that they have a challenge putting people with disabilities in these roles. When a role calls for a person with a disability, there's plenty of talented actors and actresses out there with disabilities to fill that role. Historically, it hasn't really been that great. So I know the Motion Picture Academy is working on that a bit. There's other organizations. Respectability out of DC is working on that. There's some other organizations in California working on that. So those are the types of things, but really in all aspects of life. So where art intersects and you have these films and media and things like that, that's important. But what about the titans of industry? Where are they, and where are all of the roles for all different types of disabilities throughout our society? 2/3, unfortunately, 2/3 of all working age people with disabilities are not in the labor force. 2/3 nearly. So, I mean, that to me is a national crisis. So to not be in the labor force means you're not working and you've given up looking for work. 2/3 of all working age people with disabilities not in the labor force, to me, is unacceptable. So I'm really passionate about trying to bring people into the labor force and then trying to get them employed. Oftentimes we cut right to the chase of let's get them employed. Well, you first need to get somebody resolved to want to work. And encountering blindness, encountering deafness, and then encountering deafblindness, oftentimes there's real challenges there. So while we're talking about all of the wonderful empathetic human condition here and how wonderful the story is, let's not forget that it can be very challenging, particularly if there's an event where you're aging into these challenges or it's happening all of a sudden. There can be considerable suffering there. So I think the first thing is to work with the person, make it individualized, be empathetic, figure out what works for them, what their goals are, desires, and then try to get them. Because I really believe that employment and the pursuit of employment goes to somebody's identity, and it can really help with self-determination and independence.
Beautifully put.
Doug, at our program in career launch at Perkins School for the Blind, we're really working hard trying to address the public policy problem, because in the blindness, with the population, there's between a 50 and 70% unemployment rate, and we're hoping to address it. But we're just one small program working hard to empower these students to get jobs as they transition from high school into the workforce. We specialize on 18 to 35-year-olds, and there's a lot of people who are currently unemployed who could be working, and there still remains a lot of barriers even with the ADA. For example, as I teach assistive technology to our students, there's still a lot of inaccessible technologies out there that unfortunately are assistive technologies like screen readers and braille displays and magnification programs don't quite work because the website and the software isn't designed properly to be compatible with these other technologies. So as I try and push our students out there into the workforce and make sure that they have all their needs met, they're still facing some barriers as far as technology goes.
Yeah.
I'm going to just take one moment to do an interpreter switch. Okay, we're all set there. Are you good on your end? Excellent. Okay, great. Continuing. I want to stay on that topic, but I want to go to Robert for a second. We have a question from the audience. Susan asks, Robert, have you done any other films?
So there is a problem. What we need are more deafblind actors. There are some deaf actors, but we need more deafblind actors, right? Take the movie, Independence Day. There might be a lot of extras or a lot of actual characters in a movie like that. But where are the deafblind actors, right? Not every role needs to be played as a hearing sighted role. So I think that, with the future means that we can take more deafblind actors and include them into the movies. And I, for one, would think that looks like an amazing future for us.
Yeah, that's very well put. And I believe it's 1 in 4 people in this country have a disability, and certainly that is not what we see represented on the screen. In fact, I know there's some entities that have more specific statistics on this, but I've seen it be as low as just a few % of characters that are even portrayed at all, and portrayed at having a disability, let alone played by an actor with a disability. So certainly, as it's important to me as a storyteller, and I would hope for a lot, we want to see our stories on the screen reflect the lives and the worlds that we live in. And certainly, like you're saying, Robert, that's not currently happening right now, and is certainly a space in which we have room for improvement. And that leads very well into Laura Benj from HKNC. Hello, Laura. Thanks for tuning in. She asks, how has the ADA impacted the film industry? Has it only impacted environmental spaces such as theaters and festivals, or has it had an impact on the standards in the film industry? Does anyone on the panel have anything to say to that?
That's a great point. I can address that a little bit. So in terms of moviegoers, it has certainly impacted the movie industry. So now all theaters must be accessible. They're places of public accommodation. So that's really been impactful for many people with disabilities, not only physical disabilities with actually getting into the space, but now closed captioning, assistive listening devices, and other types of communication access that are enabled as a result of the ADA. And it's taken years, but most of the major chains are pretty well accommodating this at this point, and pretty well, the ADA indicates that you have to reasonably modify your policies and procedures. And I think, again, we have ways to go, but there now is at least a foothold on access for many of these things with closed captioning and assistive listening, and again, being able to get into the door in the first place. Now, the behind the scenes, though, with the actors, people who work on major motion pictures, unfortunately, I think that's been a little limited. And that's really some gains that we could be made. I value, Robert, one of the things that I try to advance is a concept that I call using your disability as a qualification. I think Robert did a great job of that. Who better to get in a role than somebody who has the prerogative of that role? So that's, to me, is a great instance of using your disability as a qualification there. And I believe that people with disabilities can add to organizations with their prerogative that way. I mean, think about it for a second. If you're a leader and you're starting a team, who do you want on that team? Well, you want somebody who's got guts. You want somebody who's got like intestinal fortitude. Well, you know what? Artemio crossing a street or Robert taking a bus, to me, when you're deafblind, give me that person all day. Sign them up as far as I'm concerned, because you have people with full vision and full hearing who are afraid to do that. So to me, sometimes the disability is the qualification, to paraphrase President Roosevelt a bit.
I have a question from the audience for Brian, which is from Trent. He asks, Brian, are you looking to act too?
That's a wonderful question. I think I'd be very well qualified if there's an acting role that involved running. I'm happy to be a runner in a film, but we'll see. Right now I have a full-time job teaching assistive technology that I really enjoy. And, as I mentioned earlier, we work really hard to empower students, and I just love what I do for work right now.
Well, certainly the next time I hear a casting call for a marathoner, I'll just let you know, just in case you're available. But also just for a lot of you who are asking right now how you can see this again or how you can share it with other people. So again, the live streams of the Feeling Through experience for the time being are only available live. And we do that because so much of this is about building community. It's about having all of you in this space with us together at the same time, seeing you all connect through the chat, seeing, trying to create as much connection as we can during this time where we're certainly short on that. But I would encourage you and anyone else who hasn't seen this yet that you want to tell them about it, to have them follow our social media, sign up for our email list. If you go to feelingthrough.com and sign up there, we certainly send out emails and post about the next opportunity to see the experience. And I will say that we will be announcing the next opportunity to be a part of the Feeling Through experience coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. And then for some of you who are asking about doing it for like more private screenings in very specific spaces, we do that as well. So you can email us at info@feelingthrough.com and we can talk further about that, just because I saw there were some questions around there. So I have a question for Commissioner Darkangelo. I saw that in reading up on you a bit, I saw that you have some of your careers taking you into the political space. And I know that a lot of what I've come to know about the ADA, the advocacy part of the legislation is so important. Can you just speak to that from more of the political and advocacy side of things as far as the ADA is concerned, and also why it's important for people with self-identified disabilities to be in politics?
Sure. Well, I'm going to be actually hosting a panel later this week.
Plug away.
The Council on State Governments, and we're going to have a great panel. It's Bobby Silverstein, who actually helped write the ADA as a Senate staffer, Jill Houghton, who is president of Disability In, and Lex Frieden down, I think he's with the University of Texas. So it's an all-star panel. Please tune in for that. Council on State Governments later this week. I'll put the link and we can send it around. So I really think it's important advocacy-wise. So whether it was Tom Harkin, who was very instrumental. Again, I mentioned President Bush, that it wouldn't have become law if the president didn't sign it, right? So it was a bipartisan effort. And I think people knew at the time that we were living off of the Rehabilitation Act, which was put out in 1973. And while that was good and important, and it remains good and important, we really needed something to evolve and be more modern. And I think the ADA did that with its 5 titles. So the advocacy was very important. So, just so many, Ed Roberts and the whole, really, it started with the independent living movement. And then it really grew from there in various prevalence types, and then blind and deaf and all of the other people with disability types really came into the dialogue as well. So it takes a village, and I think that's what happened. And it remains that way, Doug, because the work is not done. So ADA is very important. I don't want to undersell it, and the Amendments Act is very important. But then subsequently, we've had things like the Work Investment Opportunity Act, WIOA, a very important law in terms of getting people focused on employment. And in there is PREETs, pre-employment transition services for youth with disabilities, to try to get them on the path to employment. I really have a saying that I want to try to make sure gets through to all of you. And with all people with disabilities, I really think that you need to persevere. And so many success stories like Robert and Artie and everybody else on here, Brian, have exemplified that perseverance. And I really believe that the path to prosperity is paved by perseverance. You've got to hang in there. These are difficult challenges to overcome. And maybe they're not even overcome. Maybe you get over one challenge and then you think you're great, but then another challenge pops up. But you know what? That's life. And so if you can get accustomed to that adversity and overcoming and continuing to persevere, I think you'll be a success in life, regardless of your ability or disability.
Indeed. Well said. This next question's for Robert. And a reminder to all of you watching, we still have a good amount of time left in this conversation, so if you have any other questions, feel free to continue to type those. This question comes from Alana. And Alana asks Robert, she says, I found out recently 95% of disabled characters in film and TV are played by able-bodied actors. How can we advocate to improve that?
Question.
It's a good question. And I absolutely hope that we'll see more actors in the future. Once again, I have a really positive outlook. I think that we can work hard if we continue to look into the future and keep working at it. One of the things that's really important is that we don't give up, and that when there are barriers, that we continue to work, because eventually we are going to be hired. So for, right, as an example, we have this ADA. We're not just going to forget it. We're not just going to forget about the ADA. The ADA is there to stay, and we need to use it to our advantage. So this is important. We need to remain optimistic until more deaf-blind people are acting in roles in film and on television. And I'd say the most important thing is that we keep going and remain positive.
And kind of another question from the audience that's related to that. It's from Kat Graham, and Kat is actually an old friend of mine, so very nice to see your name pop up there. Kat asks, she says, casting the first deafblind actor was clearly an incredibly important first in the arts. What first would you guys like to see next in the arts? Does anyone have an answer to that? Anything specifically that has not happened yet that's a first waiting to happen?
Well, I do know of one first that happened recently with, I previously had the privilege of running the state's Office on Disability. The prior director, her daughter actually wrote the screenplay for a film that was nominated for Best Picture. So, and she was a person with a disability. So I think that's significant. So I think the next thing to me would be these producers, these directors, these screenplays, you know, really so that it's pervasive throughout the whole film industry. Obviously, actors, behind the scenes talent, cinematographers and key grips, and really everybody on a set. Because it takes, Doug, you will attest that, you know, I have a little bit of entertainment in my family. My sister and brother-in-law own an entertainment management company, and I've been agents and managers, so I've been on sets. But you know as well, Doug, probably better than me, how many people it takes to put together a production. Dozens or hundreds, depending upon the production. Those are all good jobs. Those are all jobs that require talent, that our people probably have that talent. It's just a matter of getting them access to that opportunity.
Absolutely. And, you know, just to speak on firsts, within the feeling through world, some firsts that we'd like to champion. Well, firstly, we would like to continue the first deafblind actor first by having there be a first deafblind actor in a feature film. So that will certainly be the next goal. We continue to work toward the feature film version of Feeling Through. And certainly I imagine a more extended documentary that could follow that. So that's a first for us. And, you know, something as well that speaks very much to Commissioner, what you were just talking about. We, you know, one of my longer term goals too, and something that I'm been working with and speaking with Helen Keller Services about, and some of the grant opportunities that we are seeking in the future pertain to, would be having the infrastructure for more people in the disability community to be able to tell their own stories in media. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, having some sort of acting class or acting studio for deafblind actors and other actors in the disability community, specifically targeted towards them. Because I think the first kind of deflection that the industry might have is, well, you know, we really need a trained actor for this role and we just can't find anyone. Take that excuse away right away. And then beyond that, to also have some sort of media department for people with disabilities that really helps people in that community tell their own stories, and has classes and programs that are really specifically targeted toward the community telling its own story. So that's certainly, I love
Well,
that.
I'll tell you this, we have supported and we will continue to support VR goals around acting and the whole entertainment industry.
That's good to know. That's fantastic. So continuing on here, I have a question for you, Commissioner, from my mother, who is very good at always making sure she finds a way to ask a question. Thank you, Judy. My mother, Judy, asks, she says, I've seen a lot of more people with disabilities in advertising recently. Are advertisers finally realizing they need to reach all customers? The profit motive must provide a great push.
I've been given to Judy, you're brilliant. I've been giving speeches on this for the past 5 years to anybody who will listen, any audience that will listen. Marketers, if they're good marketers and they're smart marketers and advertisers, will recognize somewhere between 12 and 20% of their potential customers or consumers are people with disabilities. So why not speak to that? I think the brands that speak to that will get brand loyalty. As a result, you'll get more business. I think it just makes good business sense if you're a advertiser or marketer or company trying to tap into that. So I think, yeah, maybe it's taken some time, but they're realizing that, number one. Number two, also though, I mean, look at Robert. Look at, we've got such talent out there that they just are charismatic, and the product sells itself is the old axiom, right? So I think when you mix those two things together, you could just have really good content that's attractive to people. So I think there's that aspect of it as well. So yeah, I would expect to see more of it.
Robert, I remember seeing you in one of the interviews around this film that you had with a reporter. You mentioned some of the classic Hollywood actors who you really loved growing up. I'm wondering if you could maybe share some of who those actors are, and if there's like a particular film that you love that would be the type of film that you'd love to be in the future.
So, with regard to what my future looks like in terms of that, maybe I would love to be involved in horror film. I would love to be involved in a comedy. I think I have sort of the ability to jump into different roles, and I'd love to have that be them played by a deafblind person. And I would also love to be able to include many different people in one film. So I would love to be able to have a blind, maybe a blind person that can hear, or a deaf person. And I think that us being able to communicate in that way would be amazing to audience members, because I think that they would really find it amazing that we would all be able to communicate with one another. So that's another aspect that I would love to see. Before I became blind, I really always wanted to be an actor, I have to say. But unfortunately, once I became deafblind and realized I had ushers, I gave up on that dream, and I thought there would be no opportunity for me in film. So I cannot thank Doug enough for casting me in this role. as a deafblind person. So I'm extremely grateful to Doug for this role. Artie, of course, is fully deafblind, and it was a pleasure to play that character.
Well, now, Robert, my mind can't help but go to some sort of horror comedy mashup that stars you. So maybe we'll have to talk about that at some other time. But thank you for those kind words, Robert. And back to, I think it's a observation that pertains to the part of the discussion we were having about advertisers. But Neelam, who's joining us, who's on the board of the National Family Association for the Deafblind, and a great part of our Feeling Through community. Thank you for joining us again, Neelam. She says, I do not want the disability population to become simply a face of representation for a brand just to check a box. It has to be a meaningful connection and representation. And you're getting a big thumbs up from the commissioner on that one. And I think that's a really important thing to mention. Certainly, I think the arts are a great way of driving home the meaningful connection. I know sometimes advertisers couldn't care less as long as it equals dollars and cents. So the change isn't necessarily going to happen there. It might be just more of a reflection of change in other spaces, but certainly your point is very well taken.
Company can do more by hiring people with disability in their own workplace. That really showed that they're committed to the population beyond just putting them on a poster. They're really committed to making sure that they have an equal education and that they're empowered and employed and able to that they value them as employees.
So well put, Brian. And you know what that makes me think of, and I'm wondering how you feel about this specifically. I don't know if you've come across this, but I know that a commercial that I've seen playing a lot recently is an Amazon commercial with a deaf employee who's signing. So on the one hand, it's kind of bridging the gap between these two comments, because on the one hand, they are showcasing an employee with a disability in that case. On the other hand, knowing the reputation of Amazon, it really is hard to feel like they're not just trying to use that as a tactic, right? How do you feel about that personally in that specific anecdote there?
Amazon is trying their best. They recently made their software program accessible to remote office workers so that people who are blind or visually impaired can work in their customer service field. And I think that's a great step forward. I'd like to see other companies do that, and Amazon, do more. There's always more to be done.
And I've heard of I think there's multiple Starbucks locations now where the primary language in the store is ASL, which is a very, and I think that's something too. Like, again, just to praise that specific initiative. I don't know enough about those individual corporations to speak on them as a whole. But what I love so much about that is, in that one instance at least, it's taking quote unquote inclusion to the next step without it being a place that like has people who sign, have that be like the primary language there. I think is something that not only is a really beautiful thing for people who that's their first language to walk into that space and feel like the primary group catered to there, but for other people who maybe don't know anyone who signs or that's foreign to them, to try that on for size and see what it feels like to be, if you will, a minority, right, in a space for once, and kind of feel what that feels like.
Yeah, the challenges that one person with a disability may be very different from somebody with even a similar disability, let alone somebody with a different prevalence type disability. So accommodations for somebody who's deaf may work well for them, but they might not work well for somebody who's blind or somebody who's deafblind, or they might work well for somebody who's blind and not mobility, or, so there's all types of different challenges. So I try to encourage people to not think of disability monolithically, because everybody's different. All of our people are unique, and they each have different talents that maybe compensate for things as the way they were designed. That's why I think back to universal design. The closer we can get to universally designed services and programs, devices, equipment, things like that, the better off we'll be, because really that helps level the playing field. And look at what's happened now during the current coronavirus situation, where now we're all online. Had that not happened, maybe we wouldn't be online. Maybe together we'd be in an auditorium somewhere. But now we're online together, and that, to an extent, has helped level the playing field for some people with disabilities. And in other instances, it's made it more challenging for other people with disabilities. So I think it's important not to think monolithically, but rather consider everybody as an individual, and everybody has their own talents and challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, that's and hopefully that kind of thinking combined with further advances in technology will make that something that becomes easier and easier to implement. Certainly, we've seen some real leaps.
If it was easy, it would be done by now.
Yeah, well, perhaps. But yeah, certainly something that at least you know, there are new options provided on a regular basis to kind of further that journey. Certainly the advocacy around it is important to continue to have that be something that's a quote worthwhile space to invest in, right, for people.
Well, that's key. And we talk about the ADA. Another provision of legal interpretation was the Olmstead. And Olmstead really opened up communities so that there was no longer institutionalized way of thinking, institutional workshops, institutional healthcare. So now it's community-based, which is a good thing, which really opens it up, so it makes people part of the community. And I think now, even in education, children growing up today will have people with disabilities more integrated so that it's more commonplace. And so I think the future for people with disabilities on the whole looks bright with more acceptance. I really believe that.
Question for Robert. Robert, are there certain areas or aspects in your life, in your day-to-day life, where you'd like to see advancements in accessibility for you personally?
Robert's just asking their interpreter to repeat that question. That's a tough question for me to answer, honestly. Let's see. I mean, at this point, I'd say technology as an accessibility is quite frustrating for me. And I do know that Helen Keller National Center provides training for different devices and equipment that will be accessible to me. And that is something that I might need for my future. Technology might become a place in my future, and I would have to then take classes or get training from a place like Helen Keller so that I can use technology better to make things more efficient for me or make things better. So I would say at this point, as an accommodation, quite frustrating, but technology going forward with the right training will make things more accessible for me.
And just to acknowledge some of the questions I have also seen in the chat about being able to purchase the film and the documentary, that will be available at some point down the line. We're really, again, still trying to build community more through these live events to have people be able to watch it together. But in the meantime, you know, fun way to take home a piece of the Feeling Through experience and Feeling Through is on our website at feelingthrough.com/store. We have some really cool merchandise some great t-shirts and hats and posters, mugs, with some really cool Feeling Through designs on them, and also a couple limited edition Feeling Through ADA shirts that are honoring this month. So feel free to head over there. The proceeds go to supporting Helen Keller Services and future Feeling Through experiences as well. A portion of the proceeds directly to this Helen Keller Services and the rest to future Feeling Through experiences. So it's a way to get some cool gear and also support what we're doing here. Also, because some people have asked in the past, if you also don't need any more stuff but want to donate, we do have a donate button on the website, so feel free to donate directly there. Just in the last couple minutes here that we have in our conversation, I'd love to just pose the question, starting with the commissioner. For those sitting at home right now wondering, what like actionable thing can I do on my end to help further, a lot of what's been talked about today? What might you say to those people?
I would say find a way to be able to access opportunities for people with disabilities. If you are a manager, you can hire people, you can intern people, you can mentor people. There's all those types of things for employment. There's simple things like that was almost depicted in the film. There's plenty of volunteer opportunities, whether it be with public organizations or private organizations. There's plenty of things to do. That you want to join a radio reading service and read to people who are blind. You want to do, there's plenty of opportunities out there. So it's just really find them and give access to opportunities. Don't just give people things with no, here, just have it. No, giveaways. No, give them access to an opportunity. Just crack the door open, and 9 times out of 10, they'll be the ones to push the door open.
And Brian, what would you have to say about that topic?
Yeah, definitely. I think, giving people more opportunity to prove themselves, to be employees. People with disability, they're some of the best problem solvers out there because they've made it this far. They figured out a way to do things, a way for things to work that make it acceptable for them. Like Commissioner D'Angelo was saying earlier, it's not one fit solution for everyone. So, you figuring out what worked best for you, be able to do a job, to be able to volunteer, that leads to problem solving, and, these are great employees. So think about hiring them, go out and volunteer, get uncomfortable, go someplace where that deaf people hang out. There are regularly sign language meetups, and I would encourage anyone to go up and just sign up in their local area and learn a little bit of sign language. Nobody expects you to be a perfect signer overnight, but learn a word or two and get connected with people outside of your own comfort zone.
And Robert, for those who are watching this and maybe really inspired by what you've accomplished, and maybe sit at home wondering, now have new understandings of what's available to them, what might you say directly to those watching who are really inspired by the journey that's portrayed in obviously both your work in Feeling Through and the documentary that portrays your journey through that experience?
Well, if people see me act, it absolutely warms my heart when people know that, and I can't be more proud of the fact that I am the first deafblind person in that role. But this isn't where it ends, right? This is just the beginning. So I want I want to continue, and I want our community to continue. I mean, of course, who doesn't love signing an autograph? And so when I see people and they recognize me, I'm thrilled. It's exciting. But I would say that I want to continue with my goal, and I would love for more deafblind people to be part of the industry.
And for those who want to know more about Robert's journey, I encourage you to read the New York Times article that came out earlier this year, going into a little bit more detail about his personal story around this film. I think you'll find that really interesting. And one very actionable item from the feeling through side of things, it's really quite simple. You know, the main thing that we're trying to do here, both through these experiences and through feeling through our ongoing live stream of Feeling Through Live, is to continue to create a space for people within the community to connect with people from other communities, to dialogue about a whole host of topics, and also to have an ongoing platform for underheard voices in the deaf, blind, and other disability communities to be able to talk to a lot of people about a lot of different topics. So a really easy way that you can support that is to, again, subscribe to our YouTube page if you're not already. Share it with other people who you think might be interested in it, and follow our social media, where we'll be talking about more opportunities to tune into events like this, because, you know, certainly our corner of this is in the media space, and the more eyeballs we get on this, the more sway we have when it comes to doing future projects in this space. So it really does, you know, it sometimes just clicking subscribe, or, you know, texting a link to a friend saying, hey, check this thing out, it's cool, maybe doesn't feel like it's that much. But if everyone who is watching right now did that, believe me, it would have a really huge impact on what we're able to do on our side. So with that said, I'd love to just give also a shout out to the Woods Hole Film Festival, of which this event has been a part of that festival. Please go check them out. They have a ton of really awesome films that they're playing throughout the course of the week. And they're also just a great festival, and a lot of great people there who I've had a chance to connect with. So please go check that out. Thank you so much to the panelists today. It was really, really an honor and a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you, of course, to our interpreters and our captioner for making this accessible as we can. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. Again, it's such an absolute joy to see that chat box light up, and to see so many different people from different places to really make this experience what it is. So again, we'll be announcing our next experience soon. And this Friday, just like every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we will have our next episode of Feeling Through Live. So please continue to be a part of the community and tune in. So until next time, thank you, everyone, and have a great week. Bye, everyone.